today. I have Wayne Hall on the show. We are going to be talking quite a bit about county government, how county government came to be the way it is today. Wayne Hall was the assistant county administrator years ago. He was also the administrator of the court. We're going to talk about issues with the court system. He knows a lot about our county government and how we got to where we are today. And one of the reasons that I called Wayne is very recently, one of the employees over at the San Luis Obispo County Integrated Waste Management Authority, this is a joint powers agency that controls waste management. It gives advice to cities and the county and communities on how to manage their waste. You don't have to have this agency. It used to be something that the county did, and Wayne will describe that. But years ago, there was massive fraud with this agency. Many public officials stood beside the agency. It later came out that they were mismanaging funds. I'm talking to the point of going on vacation and using the government credit card to buy dresses, paying home utility bills on the government credit card. After years, only one person was indicted because for many years it was pretty well covered up. And now you have one of their employees resign because she found how she reports it is gross misappropriation of funds. And she reported it against the top two people at the IWMA. And instead of doing anything, the attorney said, we'll look into it, and left them with signing authority. And after it never went anywhere, she resigned about a week ago with a very damning letter that she sent to all the board members with the IWMA, telling them that she was forced to quit because she didn't believe they were doing the proper things to protect the public from the misappropriation of funds by, again, the two top people there. They're both there. They're now, I've interviewed people with the IWMA leadership, and basically people were getting double paid. And when it was found by this person, they blamed others for double paying them. And basically it wasn't noticed because we're so wealthy, but I have to make a payment plan to pay it back. So it's not sure where this is going to go, if law enforcement or the district attorney's office will become involved. But this has been ongoing with several agencies that used to be with the county and that were pulled away in the past. I'll give you another example. The other agency, the Air Pollution Control District, was pulled out at the same time. Their latest budget came out. Significant problems, or they had an audit of their accounting, which, sadly to say, was done by the county auditor. And an outside audit found significant deficiencies with claims of money as profit that is from grants that wasn't money as profit. And even with that, they were almost $800,000 in the red. So it's a company that is now operating in the red and primarily used to operate by fining people. But with Phillips 66 closing, they are now using grant money. But it appears they claimed earned grant monies that weren't earned because they hadn't done what was supposed to be done with some of the grants. It's in the audit report as findings, but again, this is another agency that was pulled out of oversight and is now, with less oversight, having issues with their finances. And Wayne, will you tell them a little bit about your background and how you came to work for the county?
I've been around for quite a while, since the 70s. Like so many people, came here to go to Cal Poly. Had to kind of work my way through school, driving police cars, and I was a detective. I knew the law pretty well as a law enforcement officer, and when I graduated Cal Poly, I came over to the county administrative office, and I started working there as an emergency services coordinator. Using my law enforcement background, went from that to the county's executive side of the office, where I was working as an administrator working my way up through the ranks there. And that's where I first started to learn about regional governance. And the way I saw it back then, this is how it was in the early 80s, the Air Pollution Control District, SLO Cog, Council of Governments, Regional Transit, and LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Commission. These were all agencies. They were truly agencies, and their boards were made up very similar or the same as they are today, but the county provided all the staffing, and it was very efficient. The people who were managing each of those organizations were county employees, some contracted, some permanent employees, and there were some temporary employees, and they had department heads. They were relying on the county for resources. That includes legal counsel. That includes accounting, personnel services, everything that you'd need for each of those organizations. And it was running really well. And the history part of this is back in the 1980s, cities were annexing, they were growing, and they were starting to fight a little bit with the county over revenues. And when they annex, they've got to fight over property tax and retail taxing. And there was a little bit of a rift between cities and counties. And that rift became fertile ground for employees who were working for the county, wanted to earn more money, asked for what we called reclassifications. And that's basically they wanted a bigger job than they had. They wanted to be the department head. They didn't want to be a middle manager. They wanted bigger and more money. And from my perspective, and this is what I shared with board members at the time, these employees were trying to pit cities against counties so that they could get the cities to say, we want these organizations to be independent and out of the county. And so we struggled at that time to try and keep them in the county and keep costs down. With the county, there are efficiencies that you don't get when each agency has to have its own personnel department, accounting department, banking, technical support, facilities. The list goes on and on and on. The economies of scale we're in with the county to provide all those services, and it worked very effectively for many years. But with these people who were in these jobs wanting to get bigger salaries, being rejected on their reclassification requests, from my perspective, they went to the cities and built on that rift between cities and county to the point where county supervisors could no longer hold back. If county supervisors were saying we aren't for an independent agency, the staff would get in the middle and say, well, they're cheating you. They're charging us way too much. They're bilking you. They're influencing us. They're trying to bully us into doing things the county's way and not the city's way. So you need to pull out and have your own independent agency. And as an administrator at the time, I knew this was going to cost more. I warned the Board of Supervisors that this is going to be fodder for corruption because the oversight is going to reduce. The public doesn't get to see it anymore. It's not going to be as transparent, or even if it is transparent, I'm not sure. I don't think very many people have ever been to an Integrated Waste Management Authority meeting or a regional transit meeting. So my fear was this was going to be fertile ground for corruption.
And I absolutely agree. I looked at the cost of some of these agencies. For example, the Air Pollution Control District. And as I remember, it was at $1 million or under $1 million when it was the cost to run the agency inside the county. And then it was up to $4 million not long after they pulled it out of the county to operate with salaries. Of the people there, and this is last time I looked was over 10 years ago, most people there were making over $150,000 a year. It was shocking, the salaries for these employees.
That was one of my biggest complaints when it all started, because the staff wanted big salaries from the get-go, and they didn't want local salaries. They wanted LA salaries. So those were the comparisons they were bringing to their new board, and they wanted performance pay. Our attitude about that is we pay you a salary to perform the job, and you get evaluations. Why do you need to be paid extra for doing the job you're already being paid for? And that wasn't good enough. So these salaries did balloon. They did get performance pay. They got LA salaries in San Luis Obispo County. The staff who went over there got exactly what they wanted because the board members stopped looking and they just started giving. It's a part-time job for them. It's the lowest priority of the things they do. If you can imagine being a city council member or a board of supervisors member and you're going to a regional transit or a APCD meeting, it's not your priority, and it's not the thing you're studying as much as the things that are in your own jurisdictions. You do this on the side. And now you've got employees who are not being watched so closely because you're doing it on the side, and they run amok.
And the county auditor is supposed to be watching the finances. But for example, in the case of the IWMA, they went and got their own credit card, and nobody said anything. But by law, the county auditor had to approve it and watch the spending, and it required a co-signing by the attorney for the IWMA, the waste agency, and none of that was done. They were allowed to. I think there was almost a half. $500,000 in expenditures that were not accounted for, that did not appear to be for the agency. But they also went crazy. They needed a new toilet, and they spent $10,000 buying this super toilet that had a bidet and special features, and no one said anything because there was nobody watching the spending of this agency. And at the time, Wayne Hall would go to meetings, I would go to meetings, and we would say, talk about the spending, and they just basically, no one cared.
Yeah, in fact, I started consulting, and that's how I ran into Karen, and I was consulting on compliance, land use, and permitting, and working for a garbage company that was having to work with IWMA. And it didn't take me long to figure out that at the IWMA, they, one, did not have legal appropriations. And you know this as an administrator. You know how it's supposed to work. The process required to having spending authority. These are fundamentals, and these are designed to protect the public from this kind of misappropriation. We say misappropriation. It means you're spending money without authority. You're doing it the way you want to do it. There isn't a business plan that your governing board has looked at and approved and said, okay, next year when we start the fiscal year, this is what you spend your money on. We didn't have that at the IWMA. They didn't have that for years. As far as I can remember, probably it's been at least 10, maybe more like 20 years since they had a legal appropriation. So that leaves the door open to them spending the money wherever they want. It's called, lost the word, but anyway, they're not restrained at all. Then it's all, the word I was going to use, it's all their discretion on how they spend. It's not part of a spending plan. And that's what every agency is required to have. And that's why we have budgets. And that's what I did when I was in the county administrative office, is I made sure we had the budget, which is the business plan that we do for the year coming up. It's approved by the Board of Supervisors. And that's really, other than adjustments you made to the budget, that's what you follow for how you spend money for the whole year. That was never necessary for the IWMA. They could spend whatever they wanted.
And you went to the board and you told them that this wasn't going correctly during meetings.
Yes.
And I remember some of the meetings. I remember Bruce Gibson at one meeting saying, "You'll hurt the feelings of the employees if we do an audit. This will make them feel bad, and they're such good people. We don't want to audit this company." Do you remember those comments?
I do remember those comments. That just has no place in the public sector. I was blown away.
And one of the things that's important for everyone to realize, when you pay your tax bill or your trash bill, and you're saying, why is it getting so expensive? If they are paying utilities at their homes, or they're having their house painted, or they're buying something for their brother's car, or they're paying their child's phone bill, this is all paid for by the public. That credit card bill was paid every month by members of the community when they paid their trash bills.
Yeah, and that's something a lot of people don't understand. They worry about being taxed, and they don't realize how many ways they're being taxed that they don't even know. So you pay fees when you pay for your garbage bill, and these include the franchise fee that the garbage companies pay to the county, and a landfill franchise fee, a trash pickup franchise fee. And these fees are a percentage of what the companies bill. So the more the companies bill, the bigger the franchise fee, the more revenues these agencies are able to bring in. It's kind of built to take your money away from you and not to encourage efficiency.
And one thing, I have had several people come to me, I think it was Orange County. In another county, most of the counties in California charge a franchise fee for tax, generally around 8%. But someone in that county, I think it was Orange County, there was a complaint that this franchise fee is not legal because of a 218 bid was never done. The public was never asked to approve the tax, and they had to stop collecting it. And there have been certain people arguing they shouldn't be able to get a franchise fee, first of all, because of what you said, they're not watching the spending. But second of all, it never went to a 218 vote.
Yes, and when Karen's saying 218, that Proposition 218 requires that there's an opportunity for the voters to know that they're going to be billed this and an opportunity to protest it. And the only agency that I know of in the whole county that has ever done this has been Templeton. And they did do a Prop 218 notification to their residents that said, we're gonna charge a franchise fee, and that's going to pay for this. And if anybody wants to protest, you can come in on this date and time. They're the only ones that have done this. But unless you have mandatory collection, which there isn't in this county, you can't collect a franchise fee without going through that process. And they're the only ones that have. And we brought this up, but I don't think there's much fear in local government that somebody's going to successfully be able to expose what's going on, because nobody cares most of the time, right?
Someone would have to get an attorney and sue over the franchise fee. And one of the issues with the franchise fee is governments say, wait, it's going to go up 20%. We're going to make this much more money every year. Oh, this is great if the trash bill is going up. We're going to get a word from our sponsor and come back with Wayne Hall and learn more about how we became where we are today in SLO County government and with the city.
You're involved in an accident, the most unpleasant situation. Then there's the repairs and the mounds of paperwork. Davis Body Shop reminds you that in some cases, involving an insurance company's repairs may not be the best choice, and we can help you make that decision. At Davis Body Shop, we'll take the time to discuss the options that you have available. Then you can decide whether filing an insurance claim is the best decision or not. Whether it be a minor accident, paint fading, door dings, or scratches, our body shop handles it all. We have the tools and technology to fix your car like new, and we offer iCar certified technicians and state-of-the-art facilities at both locations. Davis Body Shop on El Camino Real and Atascadero, and Davis Body Shop at Paso Robles Chevrolet on Theater Drive.
Garage door jamming? Time to call Hammond.
Hammond Overhead Door Company, serving the Central Coast for over 50 years with all your garage door needs. Residential or commercial, Hammond has the right door system for any application. As a local, family-owned company, Hammond Overhead Door Company is committed to providing the superior products you want and the personal service you deserve. Call 238-0524 or go to HammondOverheadDoor.com.
Garage door jamming? Time to call Hammond.
Hi, are you ready for a field trip? This is Barb with Tan Oak Tractor Sales, your local LS tractor dealership. Steve and I would like to invite you to the World Ag Expo in Tulare, February 13th, 14th, and 15th. Come visit our blue LS tractors on the corner of P and Greenbelt. We'll let you climb on the tractors while we answer your questions. Your landscaping and farming needs are important to LS Tractor. Visit us here on Paso Robles Street, and we'll see you in Tulare.
I am Central Coast Attorney Dave Duringer, and I believe in faith, family, and freedom. Without faith and family, there is no freedom. So the mission of my law firm, Protective Law Corporation in Morro Bay, is to help families grow family power by transmitting life, fortune, and honor to descendants. Sign up at guntrust.org for a free training, including tactical reload and emergency reload drills, mainly with handguns, but also with trusts. We train you to keep your trust loaded with regular funding checkups. We also train you to prepare for a possible Hegstead motion, which is an emergency reload for trusts, often necessary when a client fails to do tactical reloads. If you are serious about asset protection and family protection, call me, Dave Duringer of Protective Law Corp in Morro Bay. Dial 805-225-5105, or just click on my phone number at lawnews.tv. Again, lawnews.tv, LAWNEWS.tv.
The original pony car was built to make memories. Carry on that tradition with the new Ford Mustang Mach-E during our 100K Weekly Wheels car and free play giveaway from Chumash Casino Resort. Earn entries now for a chance to win this electric-powered SUV or a share of $50,000 in slot free play. Drawings January 1st, 7th, 15th, 21st, and 28th, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Welcome to freedom.
Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome back to Sound Off. My name is Karen Velie. I'm the host of Sound Off on Wednesday and Thursday afternoons, and I would continue listening today. I have Wayne Hall in the studio, and we are discussing how county government and city, this involves the cities also, because several decades ago, it was decided to pull multiple departments out of the county and make them joint powers agreements where the cities have a representative and the county have representatives and their side agencies. And many of these agencies went from charging under $1 million a year, for example, the APCD, to quickly costing more than $4 million a year as salaries skyrocketed, spending went way up, and there was very little oversight. And since then, there have been allegations of malfeasance at many of these side agencies.
Yeah, in fact, as you were saying that, I was going to give an example of how the money works with these what they call regional agencies, formed by joint powers agreement, as you've said, where they share the power of one, and they actually share the power of the county. And SLOCOG is a good example of what happens when you go the direction that we've gone. In the past, in the 80s, all that road fund money that you guys put in when you buy gasoline and other ways that they tax you, and it gets into different road funds, the money in the state where it's collected would come back to the county, and the county would distribute it based on population. So it was a per capita distribution. And we did have council of governments so that big projects could be worked on. And when I say big projects, these are projects that can be in the city or the county, and they're all competing to put some money in there. The more you put in the big projects, the less it get into roads. So what has happened when SLOCOG, for an example, and we weren't going to go this direction, but I think it provides a good example. Yeah. Where you used to have all this money coming into roads and paving roads, now it's going into salaries and buildings and all these separate components required to have an agency with benefits and retirement and what have you. And so what actually makes it onto the road and pavement has gone down and down and down in terms of the percentage that used to make it there. And now it goes into more pet projects. I say that because when you have an environment where it's not as transparent, it invites pork barreling. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's people trying to get support for a project in exchange for another, and it loses sight of what's really the best for the communities as a whole. And that's what I've seen lost the most is what is for the general good is lost now. It's everybody out for themselves with, that's how it appears to me with these regional agencies, both at the top level and for salaries and benefits for the staff that are in them. I'm sorry, people, if you're there and you've got good intentions and you're wanting to do well, this is the world I think you're finding yourselves in.
And right now, I talked to a department head yesterday, a county department, and they're I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but they're 4% in the red. The APCD appears to be massively more in the red. They do about $4 or $5 million a year, and they're almost actually if they corrected their financial problems with the audit, they're about $1 million in the red. So we're talking a lot of government with the current economy is having a very hard time functioning. And many of these, remember, the county has almost $1 billion pension deficit. The IWMA, I think it's $8 million. Or the APCD, I haven't looked at the IWMA. So this did create all these different governments with their different financial issues. Now, when you were at the county and the Board of Supervisors voted to pull all these out, were you involved along with Ray Baring in setting up these agencies?
Yes. In fact, the most recent one, the last one to be created was the IWMA, out of all the ones that you've heard about so far today. And Ray Baring and I worked on drafting the Joint Powers Agreement.
Wayne Hall, he was the former assistant county administrator at a time all these agencies left the county, and multiple agencies, the IWMA, SLO County, the APCD, and became outside agencies, and the expenses soared, and the amount that you have to pay as a taxpayer to keep these government agencies went way up, and services went down. Less money is being spent on roads and other services, while more people are getting larger salaries. And Wayne, when the IWMA was removed, you were starting to say how you were working with Ray Baring. And what was his job at the county at the time?
Ray was a deputy county counsel, so he was a lawyer for the county, and his specialty was litigation. And I'm saying that because his specialty was not in government spending or appropriations, competitive bidding, all the things that a government does as daily business. There were other lawyers who did that in the county council. They had dozens. And Ray, I got along very well with Ray. He and I worked together with a task force group that we created to draft up the Joint Powers Agency. And actually, the IWMA never was itself in the county. It came along after the others had pulled away. And this was in 1989 that the Waste Reduction Act was passed. So because we'd already had agencies that were independent, there wasn't even any question at that point of keeping the cost down and having it in the county as far as staffing and services. It was a given it was going to be an independent agency. And that's what gets expensive when they're independent. So Ray was very involved in that one. And it wasn't long after that he had resigned from county council and became the lawyer for every one of these, I think every one of these regional agencies. So it turned out to be a pretty good gig.
And these agencies pay quite a bit of money to the IWMA or to Ray Baring then went and worked with Adamski, Morosky, and Green, and they picked up all the contracts for legal for APCD, IWMA, Harbor District. There's multiple county agencies that I know of 8 that pay this law firm to run their legal. But one of the issues as a reporter when I was covering the IWMA and we found misappropriation years ago, what we thought was misappropriation and the DA later confirmed was misappropriation, we could not get documents from the agency. And the attorney firm would do everything in their power to block us and to allow a lack of transparency. Ended up there was a legal firm hired. They went after documents. Later, the president of the IWMA at the time said he pulled documents and took them, credit card records, 2 years worth, and took them to his home, and that's why they couldn't find them. So it wasn't run as government usually is with checks and balances. But then that was when you tried to get Ray Baring to do the right thing.
Yes, I realize I'm not a lawyer. I was an administrator, but I did know the law very well, and I had wonderful training from county counsel that really did know the job well. And it's not just there; it's the county auditors and the other departments and the state that you work with, and you learn how it's supposed to be done right. So I could see that appropriations weren't legal. I could see that bidding was not competitive where it should have been competitive. There were so many issues in how money was being spent with the IWMA, and I didn't understand what was going on with Ray. And when we would challenge him on it, including him using his own signature for purchasing, which is unheard of for a lawyer in an organization, we didn't get any response from him at all. And when we would stand before the governing boards and tell them this was going on, they didn't respond. They continued with more. So ultimately, we complained to the Bar Association. They were not getting the proper legal counsel. One thing I have to throw in with this also that people need to realize, each of these agencies pay a retainer, and I'm only guessing this is why it went from Ray Baring being the sole operator providing legal services for each of these agencies to him being part of a firm. Now he's able to say, oh, you want to do plastic bag ordinance? Well, now you need to pay extra for this firm, my firm now, to do special legal services for you. So everything that came up that was not day-to-day or could be called not day-to-day required very large billing separate and through his law firm to get the legal services done.
And I know when you made the complaint to the bar that the bar confirmed some of the allegations, but then Ray Baring resigned. All of his county positions gave the law firm, Adamski, Moravsky, and Green, that he was working with, kept all the accounts and put a different attorney in at the time. At the time, many of them were covered by Jeff Minery, who after a couple stints away for months at a time, just started his own law firm, and many of the other lawyers took over. But Ray Baring then, he decided, I'm not going to be an attorney anymore during the bar investigation. He left legal work and resigned from the firm. I went in to ask for some legal documents they had told me they would give me. And the secretary there told me at the time, she said, we don't care that Ray Baring is in trouble, or he doesn't care that he is in, has the bar is looking at him. He was going to retire anyway, so this isn't a big deal. So it was very clear that even the staff there was very aware that there were allegations of a lack of transparency. I had another attorney go in and ask for documents on my behalf, and was also given kind of a pseudo threat saying something about a family member. So this was a very Wild West time when there were allegations of misappropriation.
Yeah, and I recall us standing before the Integrated Waste Management Authority Board and being very specific about what we were observing that were either dishonest or illegal, and even the little stuff where Ray is leaving and not being held accountable, and the agency head was not being held accountable, and Minery, part of that law firm, is saying, when people are questioning, can we hold back his retirement? Can we, because this is money that is due to the IWMA these people have taken, and we can get it from these people. The law actually says we can recover some of the money these people have stolen from assets that they have. And one of those assets, for example, would have been Ray's retirement. And Minery said he didn't have a retirement, which was not correct. He did have an account where they saved money for his retirement. And so we would bring that up to the board, and they'd shrug and go on as business as normal.
And for members of the community, and you're saying, well, I'm in Paso Robles, I'm not in the county. Paso Robles has a representative. You are paying bills related to this agency. And at the time, Debbie Arnold was trying to get an investigation and a forensic audit of this agency. And the representative for Paso Robles in the beginning was voting with Bruce Gibson and Adam Hill, who were arguing, we cannot do an audit. We're going to hurt people's feelings. It wasn't until much later that it became clear that there was malfeasance, that they did agree to, well, it was after the DA said, I'm looking at this now, that they agreed to do an audit.
Yeah, in fact, anybody who has been in business will find this strange. The fact that they actually did hire somebody to do a forensic audit and then claimed when it was done that they did not make arrangements for anything to be in writing, that they had nothing to show us, and that there was no report out. You talk about sweeping it under the rug. I don't know what would be more blatant than that. We never got to see it.
And I will, as a reporter, I have noticed when government agencies are untransparent, it's generally the same agencies that are attempting to hide something from the public. Let's change a little bit and talk about a different agency. The Emergency Medical Services was also taken out.
Another, and it's probably it's always had a. It was always an independent one too, I think. I'm not sure. It dates so far back. I'm not sure if it ever was fully county supported, but it was always a small little organization, and it's regional. So it's got a board made up of people from the cities and from the county, just like these others that we're talking about. And my experience with it in the 80s and beyond, but back in the 80s was that it was designed to improve medical care and response, but then it became more involved in the ambulance business and who gets to have a contract and who doesn't. So back in the 80s, we had half dozen ambulance companies or more in this county. Now we have one. It's a monopoly, and this is what government involvement in regulation has brought in San Luis Obispo County, is making everything more expensive. And that's what they've done with the ambulance companies. Karen and I were talking about this before, and I think we're right at about number 2 most expensive ambulance service in the state.
I looked it up about 8 years ago, and we were number 2 8 years ago. But part of it also had to do with fire departments. Some counties have the fire departments involved in they show up for a heart attack. They come as first responders, and then the ambulance service comes in. Can you describe this and why this is more expensive than other models?
Yeah, it's called dual response, and when you hear a term like that, you always think redundancy, and is it really necessary? And it does make things very expensive. Firefighting has gotten real expensive. It's a big bill in the county, as I think most people know. County Fire is it's actually an agency, but it contracts with Cal Fire to provide those services. And now every person, every firefighter, fire engineer has got some medical training, and usually every crew has at least one EMT, so they're responding like they're an ambulance with a big fire truck. And then the ambulance is always responding to the same kinds of calls. And if you look at the call records, most of them are medical calls that come into the fire station now. And we have this dual response that is very, very expensive. And nobody's tried to make it more efficient or less expensive. It just keeps going on, and the price tag keeps getting bigger.
Next, we're going to finish up first talking about this idea of dual response for ambulances. In our county, if you call 911, let's say you have a child who has a seizure. You call 911, the fire department shows up first. The ambulance company is restricted for leaving for, I think it's 5 minutes, and they show up second. So the firemen will come in, and they will start, and they'll talk to you, and they'll do what needs to be done. And then the ambulance comes in and they tell the ambulance what they did, the ambulance drivers will generally do the same services and then transport the person to the hospital. And the ambulance company, the reason the fees are so high, they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to the fire department for showing up first. But in some cases, and I think it's Fresno County, they voted to stop that and just have firemen show up if there was, a fire or a need for firemen, like jaws of life at an accident. There are times that fire department needs to be there. Their costs for their fire department and for their unfunded liabilities went way down as staffing went away. And the other big benefit, I read the reports, was that people's outcomes were better because they were getting to the hospital quicker because you did not have the handoff from the fire department to the ambulance services, which, because of government costs of employees, can operate much cheaper.
Yeah, getting the people to the hospital as fast as you can and not having to go through that's worth a lot and saves a lot of money if you can reduce the dual response. Unfortunately, in the fire service and probably in most of these public services, they want call volume, and they use that to justify expanding their organizations, getting more line staff, more facilities, more money. And I think that's what drives a lot of what we're seeing today.
But this is a cost to the consumer, even in their medical bills.
Absolutely, and it doesn't help that the county's method of regulation encourages a monopoly, or they actually are part of developing a monopoly where there's no competition for the ambulance companies. So what is done the way the ambulance company wants to do it. I'm not sure how much the Emergency Medical Services Agency is really influencing medical care any longer in the county when there's only one ambulance company.
And what else does the emergency medical services do?
They get a lot into how care is provided, and that's really one of the best parts of it. They were involved in the contracting that we do and everything that led to having just one ambulance company, but they're also involved in care management. So they create standards, and they do a lot of good things that are beneficial to us all.
And we're going to switch over to the court. So you were the assistant administrator for the county, and you were asked to be the court administrator.
I went over to the courts as a court administrator. And
what year was that?
This would have been about 1998. This was after the Trial Court Funding Act of 1997 passed. And this is the big story today, one that's never broken. And you're hearing it break here right now because the story hasn't been told. This is where courts were trying, back up a little bit here. Before the Trial Court Funding Act came out, there was a fight between schools and county over property tax, and the legislature gave most of the money to schools, and the counties were upset, and they sent their lobbyists. They complained up in Sacramento that they got shorted money, and the people who developed this Trial Court Funding Act said, this is how we're going to pay you back. We're going to take over your trial court funding expenses. Up until that point, courts were in the counties. You had municipal court, superior court, separate jury commissioner, and a clerk's office. They were all separate. And this was actually by design in the original Constitution for California, with the idea that if these are things that the judges don't touch, they don't get involved with, they won't have opportunity for conflicts of interest. So the judges were always state paid. The legislature set their salaries, and they were separate and apart from everything else in the organization that was county run. So now you can see a little hands off. That had to be good, and it was good. And that changed with the Trial Court Funding Act. And one of the interesting things to me about that, as part of the Trial Court Funding Act, before it actually passed, we were asked to start keeping track of costs of the courts. And we did that because after the state was going to take over the expenses for trial courts, we were going to, the counties, continue to pay what our historical costs were for the courts. So they were only going to help us with the difference between historical costs and the growth in costs in the future. And that still appealed to the county. This made up for the money that the counties felt that the legislature took away and gave to schools. A background that you probably don't need to care much about, but it becomes important when you see how this developed. So with the Trial Court Finding Act, when they were going through the bill, they reached a point where it didn't look like it was going to get done in time. And I was involved in this and in drafting even some of the language and being up in Sacramento a lot. So I got to see all this firsthand. They got to the point where they were trying to decide what the employees were going to be in and what union was going to represent them and things like that. That's where things get bogged down. It started to get bogged down. So the legislature decided we need to get done with this. We'll revisit it. You know how that goes.
Did they revisit it?
No. So they said, we'll revisit it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say in here that the trial courts are going to have the presiding judge will have the authority to enter into contracts, and that'll allow them to continue to do business. That's all that's in the law about how the courts are going to be governed. The presiding judge can enter into contracts. There's nothing else. So there's no mention in law about the Brown Act and how it may apply to the courts because they didn't exist back then. All of these laws that we have there to require transparency and that we are familiar with all other public agencies do not apply to the court. The court got to then decide how they were going to govern themselves. And for a while, the Judicial Council got involved and said, well, we're going to do this on the state level, and we're going to try and govern it. That didn't last too long before the judges said, nope, we're going to govern ourselves, and we're not going to follow what you tell us to do. So what you have today now is each county that has a court there, which is a state court, you have a body of judges that are governing themselves. This is like teachers in a school district making up the whole board. And I'm not complaining about a teacher being on a board, but if the whole board were teachers, where goes that interface that used to be between the public and that entity and the services it provides? Your governing boards are supposed to be like ombudsmen. They're your connection. They translate. They get the mood of the community, what the mood needs and the needs of the community, and they translate that into a plan that ends up being a budget each year and policies that guide that organization. Now you have judges who might have a self-interest. They are governing themselves. They are entering into contracts. They don't have to have competitive bids. They're not mentioned in the law as far as an organization that has to have competitive bids. Everything that you would expect for a court to be regulated by does not apply to the courts anymore.
So they also don't have the Brown Act, so you don't know what they're saying in their board meetings where they're making decisions on spending.
Correct. The state is still involved, but it's much less today because the judges, I understand, and this happened after I left the court, but the judges put their foot down. They exercised their political muscle, and the Judicial Council backed off and kind of assumed a role that they used to have before, which is more having to do with the legal part of it and form and function, but not with governance.
And then what happened? What did you find was happening with the court here? Who was the presiding judge, and what were the issues?
Yeah, the presiding judge changed it every year. We had a different flavor on a regular basis because they vote each year on who's going to be the new presiding judge. But for me, one of the key things that happened was I see you wanted to say something, Karen.
No.
Okay, it was human nature, I guess, is what I want to say. It's not unlike what happened with these other regional agencies when they broke off and became independent agencies. Now you have the courts breaking off and being an independent agency, and some of the judges are starting to say, well, let's increase our salaries. Let's give ourselves more compensation. However we do that, let's see what we can do. The problem with that was they had legal opinions both from the county and from the Judicial Council's lawyers that said only the legislature can set compensation benefits for judges. And our court decided to ignore that. And I remember specifically being in a meeting where one of the judges...
Which one?
That would be Larry LaBarbera, when he was said, well, we've got legal opinions that say you can't do this. And his response was, who's going to tell him? And that really bothered me. And the response was at the time, well, I don't have to tell him. We don't have to tell them. Nobody here, but they're going to find out. We're still audited. And thank God that there are still audits if you're allowed to see them. I mentioned at the IWMA where we didn't really get to see them all the time. But thank God, because the Judicial Council actually did get to see that audit and started asking questions. And I at that time, I wasn't going to make anything up. I wasn't going to try hide anything. Omissions are just as bad as making lies. We're going to be honest with them. And I was called to go down to the appellate court down in San Diego and tell them what happened up here. They weren't happy at all with that.
And it was more than just raising their salaries. Were there furniture and vacations and time off?
Yeah, everything changed with the court because, again, there's nobody looking at this. So every judge wanted to have their own office decorated in their own way, and we were spending a lot of money. So, and in fact, this is part of the reason why I mentioned this maintenance of effort, us tracking the expense of courts, because the counties were going to have to keep paying for what they historically paid. The state got rid of that, and I can only imagine why. My imagination tells me that if you looked at what the county traditionally spent for courts historically and you look what they're spending today, it would be such a huge gap you would be shocked because the expenses went way up. Every judge had to be a Superior Court judge. Now we did away with municipal court judges. Judges did not want to do small-time cases. They only want to do the big cases, felonies, don't want to do misdemeanors anymore, big civil cases. So the emphasis in the court changed. Smaller cases that need attention or were shipped to commissioners who you may not have even heard the term, but these are basically appointed judges that people agree to when they come into the courtroom, and they're not a full state-appointed judge. And then as time passed on, the voters said, we want all judges to be Superior Court judges. It was a change to the Constitution, and so we did away with the whole municipal court idea and eventually did away with commissioners too because they converted these positions over to Superior Court judges. I'm mentioning all this because I'm hoping you see where this goes, where you have everybody that wants to be the big judge, the Superior Court judge, and doesn't want a caseload that's anything beneath them. And so the attitudes changed in the court.
And were they also, we had talked years ago. I had interviewed Wayne probably 15 years ago about some of this. But weren't there also some vacations or time off that they were taking extra time off, and also very fancy furniture?
Yeah, it was, the furniture was very fancy. A motif had to be different for every office, and the colors had to be different. And time off was no longer regulated much by the Judicial Council or not looked at, and it became easier for the judges to get visiting judges to come in, and that's quite profitable for those visiting judges. They want to come in, so it became harder and harder to cover cases because of that. Yeah.
And were you asked when the judicial started looking at this, did Barry LaBarbera talk to you about it?
Yes.
Tell me about that conversation.
Well, he was very unhappy with how it was coming down because it looked like it would be exposure, but he was also very arrogant about what they could do to the county. So he wasn't going to give back. So I estimated at the time the extra benefits that they got were about $20,000 each in cash, what you'd figure out it valued to. The Judicial Council wanted them to stop and give it back, and LaBarbera said no way. So it went to face-off, and ultimately the Judicial Council decided that looked bad. Most of the other courts were conforming. They were going back to what the Constitution and the law required, and that is only the legislature could set salaries. This county was not, and they weren't going to. So the Judicial Council ended up working with the legislature to draft a bill that would say San Luis Obispo County is basically allowed to continue what they did here, even if it doesn't say even if it's wrong, but that's what you'd read. And they actually got a law passed that said, all right, what you did is okay this one time.
But they can't do it moving forward. So they had hearings down in San Diego regarding allegations of misspending by the judges in San Luis Obispo County. It was validated, but they basically got a slap on the wrist. We're going to look the other way for this. And these are the judges that are judging other people for doing the right thing.
Yeah. It doesn't build a lot of confidence. And the whole idea of the courts breaking off, it was funding.
15, 20 years ago, I wrote the story about what happened in the court. Wayne, did anybody else in media even give you a call and ask you about this issue with the hearings in San Diego?
No, not one. No interest at all.
This is part of the issue with media. Many media at this point, they don't want to write critically about government because they're afraid government won't talk to them. If we write this, government's not going to call us back, and we're not going to get information. So they often don't write about government and ask the critical questions.
The question I have is, right now in our court system, you can file for a matter, and then let's say there's something that you go back in for, and there's a continuance for some reason. Those continuances are getting up to 6 months long, even for smaller things. I'm not talking about, trial setting and things like that, but smaller matters that you're trying to take care of, say, in the probate court. My question is there anything that a practicing attorney can do about that? Is there an agency, or is there anyone that we can talk to about that problem, or are we just stuck with that?
Wow. I can think of different attorney organizations, but I have the feeling, and it's sad news to say, that you're almost stuck with it because there isn't a means for the public to provide that kind of feedback to the court. As I was saying earlier, it operates kind of in the dark area. There's no structure to it. There's no place for public input or feedback. The judges governing themselves don't even have rules that they follow by to do that. So I don't know how you'd get your feedback to them to let them know. That's one of the weaknesses, and that's the problem. Why you can't have the legislature say we'll come back to it and not come back to it, because it was the most important part. How do we govern them? And governing is giving the people a voice on how services are provided. I don't know how else you could get your feedback to them to let them know how it's affecting you. It's become very inefficient, and I don't know if you got the gist of why. The judges want to do the big cases, and there aren't a lot of, they're all big fish, and there aren't a lot of little fish left to do the day-to-day stuff that means the most to us.
It makes it very difficult. Like right now, I just got a continuance on a matter this morning, very small issue that needs to be addressed, and the date they gave me was in June.
Yeah.
And so you're potentially looking at 2 hearings in a year for just for things that are sometimes just procedural or administrative.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there was any way to address that, but it sounds like there isn't.
And that's
but
why
I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, it's why I say it's a big story. There needs to be a way to reach the judges so they connect back with the public. And when they passed the Trial Court Funding Act, and it was just about funding, everybody in the court system, everybody in government wanted to say, this is our chance to open the doors and have people see what the court is and how to access it and improve and increase access. And we actually had committees to do that. And I believe it was all just window dressing, because I viewed it all as regressive after that. We didn't do that. And I heard judges in San Luis County say, no, we don't want to welcome the public in. We don't want that kind of access. We want this to look mysterious. We want people to be afraid of the courts, not to feel like they can come in here and do whatever they want, not to come in pro per, meaning representing yourself. They wanted lawyers in there, and they wanted stuff that suited them. I'm sorry, that's not a very good answer.
What changes do you think with county government and the court would help at this time? What could help make it more efficient and less costly?
Well, I'm going to sound, I hate to sound this way, but empire building is what has been occurring. I hope that's what you see from what we've been sharing with you today, whether it's been with these regional entities or it's been with the courts. People are trying to raise their salaries and benefits at the cost of the taxpayer, and we reel that in by having better governance. If we're talking about the courts, the legislature has to finish their job and actually build an organization, build some governance in for the courts so that they aren't just running themselves and deciding what they'll do and requiring some interface between them and the public. And then on the regional agency side, they need some economies of scale. You can't have each one of these little empires, these fiefdoms out there building and building and building and having very little, if any, true oversight. And you get that by bringing it all in, even if you had just one for all of them to provide those services rather than spreading it all out. It just seems it'd be easier if it was the county, if the cities could trust the county to do that because they have all those systems in place. Then you can save money, sell those buildings that all these different entities bought, bring it back into the county. You could save all kinds of money.
I want to thank you very much. There are very few people who have been in your situation, a county administrator and the administrator of the court. Thank you very much for being here today.
You're welcome. I know I'm an odd duck.
I thank you very much for giving the information to the community.